The rain fell on Incheon International Airport with the gentleness of a damp, constant veil, transforming the dawn lights into diffuse stains that reflected on the glass panels like distorted memories of something that could no longer be recovered. Inside that enormous departure hall, where voices mingled with electronic announcements and suitcases were dragged hurriedly, Han Soo-jin remained motionless, as if time had chosen to stop just for her, while everyone else went about their lives. Without realizing that there, at that very moment, a heart was being torn apart piece by piece, her fingers gripped the boarding pass that looked more like a deportation order, and with each involuntary movement of her hands, the paper crumpled a little more, recording the silent despair she couldn't express in words. Inside the inner pocket of his coat, wrapped in a carefully folded sheet of paper, lay the secret she still didn't have the courage to reveal. 2 red lines marked on a test that heralded a life, a change, a truth capable of turning everything upside down. However, deep in her heart, stronger than fear, lay the persistent hope that he would return, that he wouldn't let her embark alone, that all this silence was merely a test to confirm something that neither of them yet knew how to face. It was then that the sound of footsteps she would recognize among thousands echoed off the marble. Lee Min-seok appeared with his usual impeccable posture, a perfectly tailored suit, and the coldness of someone who had already made an irreversible decision. He approached, held the suitcase with the same indifference with which he signed contracts, pushed it towards the baggage claim, and without looking directly at her, uttered the phrase that shattered any possibility of return. "Don't look for me anymore." If fate has already decided to separate them, what will happen when Min-seok discovers that abandonment that night has condemned him to lose far more than he imagined? If this story has already grabbed your attention and made you feel the weight of this scene, imagine the impact of the upcoming revelations. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like now to follow each chapter of this twist that promises to shake everything you believe about love, pain, and revenge. Han Soo-jin had always been the type of woman who believed more in hard work than in luck. She was born in Busan, in a humble neighborhood where the smell of fresh fish mingled with the sound of boats arriving at the port at dawn. Her childhood was marked by small battles, notebooks used for more than a year, mended shoes, part-time work even before she reached adulthood. While other girls dreamed of traveling, she dreamed of giving her mother a day without pain, a day without worries. Her mother's diagnosis of kidney failure came too early, and since then every extra shift, every sleepless night, was dedicated to paying for doctors, tests, and medications that seemed never ending. Despite her exhaustion, Soo-jin never lost her kindness. She was the type of person who smiled at the building's security guard, offered umbrellas to strangers in the rain, and bowed respectfully even to those who didn't notice her. She worked as an administrative assistant at a small outsourcing company that provided services to large conglomerates. And even so, she never complained about the piles of spreadsheets and reports she finished after hours. Her colleagues said she had too big a heart for the world she lived in. Perhaps they were right. Her greatest pride was the savings account she maintained with military discipline. It wasn't a large sum, but it meant freedom. Each deposit represented hours of sacrifice, meals she skipped, clothes she didn't buy. And yet, when her mother needed something urgently, it was this money that went without hesitation. She believed that true love was revealed in these small, silent renunciations, in the ability to care without expecting recognition. At night, Soo-jin studied business administration at a public university. She always sat in the front row, carefully taking notes, and dreamed of one day opening her own business. Silently, she imagined offices with large windows, meeting rooms with plants, and a team she would treat with respect, exactly the way she had always wanted to be treated. She had no idea that fate would take her far beyond what she dared to dream. Soo-jin had few luxuries, but she carried something that no money could buy, an unwavering faith that good things happened to those who didn't give up. When love arrived, it found fertile ground in someone too pure to distrust the world. However, the purity that made her special also made her vulnerable. She didn't yet know that she was about to enter a universe that didn't forgive sensitive hearts. Because while Soo-jin was working to build a future, someone in Seoul was about to crush all her plans, and the way that happened would change her life forever. Lee Min-seok wasn't just a CEO, he was a name that made investors jump out of their seats and journalists scramble for space. Children of chaebols are usually groomed from a young age to inherit empires, but Min-seok was molded to dominate them. Educated abroad, fluent in 3 languages, a Harvard graduate, and trained to lead meetings before he even knew how to drive a car, he grew up hearing that feelings were distractions and that vulnerability was a character flaw. His father, the founder of MSK Holdings, never asked him if he was happy, only if he had succeeded. Min-seok's schedule was planned minute by minute. 5 in the morning, private gym on the 42nd floor of the company. 8 o'clock, first meeting of the day. 9 o'clock, video conference with international partners. From noon onwards, contracts, negotiations, and decisions involving millions. The world watched him as if he were a rare gem. However, behind the elegance of his tailored suits and impenetrable demeanor, there was someone who had never learned to be loved, only to be respected. He walked through the corridors of MSK Holdings with firm, calculated steps, as if the ground already knew the direction he should take. There was something almost choreographed about his presence. Employees moved away when he passed, sycophants adjusted their tone of voice, and even experienced directors had difficulty meeting his eyes. There was power there, but also coldness. With each decision, it was as if Min-seok erected a wall around himself, brick by brick, until no one could see even a glimmer of humanity. To the press, he was the prodigal son of business. To the company's advisors, a brilliant strategist. To his family, the ultimate pride. But for himself, there was only one goal: to prove he was worthy of the throne he had inherited. Personal commitments, friendships, and any emotional ties were disposable if they hindered the company's path. He knew exactly where he wanted to go, and he wouldn't allow anything or anyone to interfere. Min-seok didn't know the meaning of the word empathy. He knew how to charm, manipulate, and negotiate, but he didn't know how to stay. He had a habit of looking at people like pieces on a chessboard, useful only as long as they served the game. He didn't make promises, he didn't get attached, he didn't leave traces, but no matter how convinced he was that he controlled everything, fate was about to place someone in his path who would not just be another piece. She would be the move that would turn the entire board around. And when these two worlds finally collide, Min-seok will learn that there's something even power can't buy: the consequences. That day, Soo-jin was more tired than usual. It was the end of the workday, and she had been sent by the outsourced company to deliver documents directly to the MSK Holdings headquarters, a building so tall it seemed to pierce the Seoul sky. Upon entering the main lobby, she felt the weight of the contrast between its simplicity and the luxury that surrounded it. Polished floors reflected like mirrors, automatic doors opened with invisible sensors, and people dressed in impeccable suits walked briskly as if every second had a financial cost. Soo-jin held a stack of contracts in a cardboard folder, her fingers marked by anxiety and the responsibility of not making a mistake. While waiting for the elevator, her cell phone vibrated in her pocket with a message from the clinic confirming another hemodialysis session for her mother. Her heart tightened, but there was no time to succumb to exhaustion. As soon as the elevator arrived, a group of executives exited, and unintentionally bumped into her. The briefcase slipped from her hands and dozens of pages scattered across the floor like paper snow. She knelt down to pick everything up and felt her face burn with shame when she realized that everyone around her was watching. But no one bent down to help, until a pair of Italian shoes stopped in front of him. Before she could react, someone knelt down and began collecting the papers with her. When Soo-jin looked up, she met the gaze of Lee Min-seok, the CEO. He said nothing, simply handed her the papers with a firm gesture. The world seemed to stop for a few seconds, not because of a romantic enchantment, but because she never imagined that this man, accustomed to giving orders, would lower himself to the ground for someone like her. "Do you work here?" he asked, noticing the simple name tag hanging around her neck. "I'm an administrative assistant for a third-party company," she replied, trying not to stutter. Min-seok carefully examined the documents and noticed they were meticulously organized. She expected a cold comment, but instead he said, "Your organization is impeccable." Soo-jin blinked, surprised to receive recognition from someone so unapproachable. He stood up, handed her the folder, and briefly touched her hand. It was a quick, almost imperceptible touch, but enough to make her heart race. The elevator opened again, and before entering, he glanced at her over his shoulder. "Keep it up." The tone was simple, but that compliment planted something in her. For the first time, she felt that someone finally saw her dedication, even if it was just a spark coming from a powerful stranger. The elevator doors closed, taking Min-seok to a world that seemed unreachable. Soo-jin stood still for a few seconds, clutching the folder tightly, as if holding on to a sign that her life was finally changing. She had no idea that this seemingly small encounter would be the first step in a story that would consume her completely. Fate had just brought the two face to face, but fate also has a cruel sense of humor, and it was only beginning to play with them. In the days that followed, Soo-jin tried to convince herself that the encounter in the MSK Holdings lobby had been nothing more than a coincidence, something occasional and meaningless, even though a strange feeling insisted on echoing within her, as if some invisible thread was about to pull her in an unexpected direction. However, coincidences have a habit of repeating themselves when fate seems intent on bringing two people together, and the following week, when she returned to the building to deliver reports, the elevator door almost closed in front of her until a male hand held it open, allowing her to enter. It was Min-seok. He showed no surprise at seeing her there and kept his gaze on her throughout the journey to the 40th floor, creating a silent tension that made Soo-jin understand, perhaps for the first time, that she was not invisible in that world of cold corridors and important people. From that day on, the unexpected began to happen with increasing frequency. She was repeatedly called upon to deliver documents directly to the executive office, even though that wasn't the job of a contracted assistant. The orders were always the same: deliver them personally to the president's floor. Min-seok observed every detail of her posture, how meticulously she organized papers, how she thanked even for small acts of kindness, and this continuous observation transformed simple recognition into curiosity. It wasn't affection nor passion, but a silent interest began to grow in the spaces that the professional could no longer fill. On a nearly empty Friday, when the office was filled with silence and Soo-jin was working overtime, reviewing reports to pay for her mother's treatment, Min-seok appeared, approached her unhurriedly, and after listening to her explanation, invited her to dinner, though the invitation had the tone of a veiled order. At the restaurant overlooking the Han River, he listened to her story with an attention she never expected to receive from someone so distant from her world. When the evening ended and he said she deserved to be valued, Soo-jin believed him because she needed to believe him. She just didn't know that this care came at a price, and it would be demanded when she was most vulnerable. As the weeks passed, what had begun with discreet meetings in quiet restaurants and long conversations began to occupy an increasingly larger space in Soo-jin's life. Min-seok, accustomed to controlling everything, began to shape her routine almost imperceptibly. Invitations that sounded like orders, messages sent in the middle of the night with a simple, "I need to see you," cars sent to pick her up. Without warning, Soo-jin felt desired, important, almost chosen. It was as if, for the first time in her life, someone saw in her something that no one else had seen before. However, what was love for her was merely convenience for him. Min-seok liked the lightness she brought, the simplicity with which she treated him without flattery, the feeling of refuge amidst the suffocating corporate life. But this interest had a hidden deadline, and the clock would start ticking when his world finally noticed her presence. The first crack appeared at a business event hosted by Min-seok's family. Soo-jin wasn't on the guest list, yet he insisted she attend, claiming no one would pay attention. As soon as she arrived, she felt the discomfort like an invisible pressure on her shoulders. The hall was enormous, illuminated by crystal chandeliers that reflected the golden gleam of the haute couture dresses. Men in suits raised champagne glasses while exchanging business cards. It was a completely different world from hers. She tried to blend in, but the simplicity in her gestures betrayed her. When Min-seok's mother appeared, Soo-jin bowed politely. The woman, wearing a navy blue silk dress and jewelry that could pay for someone's entire university education, looked her up and down as if analyzing a stain on the carpet. Without even trying to hide her disdain, she leaned towards her son and muttered loudly enough for Soo-jin to hear, "Are you still collecting charity projects?" Soo-jin's face burned, but before she could turn away, Min-seok discreetly and firmly grabbed her wrist, as if telling her to stay. However, instead of defending her, he kept his gaze fixed on the glass, pretending nothing had been said. At that moment, she felt like she had been pushed onto a stage where everyone was waiting for her downfall. Event staff began to whisper. Some women laughed behind their glasses, insinuating that Soo-jin was there to find a husband. "You know how it is. These girls see a last name and throw themselves at you," one of them said, laughing. Soo-jin took a deep breath, swallowed her tears, and tried to maintain her composure. Later, when the event was over, inside the car, she mustered the courage to ask Min-seok why he hadn't defended her. He remained gazing at the scenery through the window, as if contemplating something very distant. "You shouldn't have come," he said curtly. "But you invited me," she replied, her voice almost inaudible. "I invited you, but that doesn't mean you belong here." Those words didn't just hurt her self-esteem, they struck her to the core. A feeling of inadequacy settled in, stifling the sparkle that had once existed in her eyes. However, when he realized the pain he had caused, he tried to soothe it, touching her face as he did when he needed her to stay. It was Min-seok's technique, to wound, then caress, creating a scar that he himself offered to heal. "Don't worry, Soo-jin, you're important to me," he said, as if it were a compliment. She wanted to believe him, and she did, because when you love someone, your mind looks for excuses to justify what your heart doesn't want to accept. What she didn't yet know was that that night would be just the first of many humiliations. And soon, something far more cruel was about to happen. Something that would begin with 2 red lines on a test hidden in the bathroom drawer. After the night of humiliation, there was an inexplicable silence between the two, as if something had been ripped from inside her. But the real rupture happened weeks later, when her body began sending signals she couldn't understand. Symptoms that appeared unexpectedly, such as delayed periods, dizziness that made her lean against hallway walls, and sudden nausea on the subway. Soo-jin tried to rationalize, attributing the discomfort to overtime, stress, and constant pressure for results. But the breakdown came when she fainted in the company break room and was carried by a colleague to the bathroom, where she remained seated on the cold floor, holding a pregnancy test in trembling hands. She waited for the result, watching the digital pointer on her cell phone, feeling her heart pound so hard it felt like it wanted to burst from her chest. And when she finally turned the test over, 2 red lines appeared clearly, marking the truth irrefutably, as if someone had written before her the most transformative phrase of her life. Her reaction wasn't fear, but a silent cry that mixed relief and hope, because at that moment she felt she had found a reason to go on, as if life was offering her something she had never received from anyone: belonging. Later, she decided to tell Min-seok, believing the news would create a new beginning, and when he texted her to come to the underground parking lot, she took the ultrasound with her in an envelope, keeping it as if carrying a future. Inside the car, she tried to explain but met only with coldness. When she placed the envelope beside him, expecting his hands to touch the paper carefully, he opened it, looked at it for a few moments, and returned the crumpled ultrasound, as if discarding something worthless. He stated that he didn't want the child, and he didn't want her either. And at that moment, what broke inside Soo-jin wasn't just love, it was her very identity, because she understood that for him, she had never existed as a person, only as a utility. However, the cruelest part was yet to come, because rejection was only the first step towards definitive abandonment. In the days following their last argument, Soo-jin tried to convince herself that Min-seok's distance was only temporary, believing he needed time to understand the depth of the situation and process the idea of the pregnancy as a new chapter that could bring them closer. However, his silence grew increasingly intense, as if each ignored message was another brick in a wall rising between them. And the longer she waited, the more she realized she was alone in that feeling. When her phone finally vibrated, she found no comforting words or even an explanation, just 2 words: "Come down, now." Soo-jin rushed to the parking lot, her heart filled with expectation, imagining he wanted to talk. But upon opening the car door, she realized something had changed drastically. Her suitcase was in the back seat, packed with a precision that made it clear someone else had done it for her, and in the glove compartment was an envelope with an airline stamp. Min-seok, sitting in the passenger seat, kept his gaze fixed on the window, and with the same coldness with which he decided on multi-million-dollar mergers, ordered the driver to go to the airport. During the journey, Soo-jin tried to understand what was happening, but Min-seok explained, with almost surgical indifference, that she was confusing kindness with commitment, and that distance would be better for both of them, as it wouldn't allow a pregnancy to ruin her image and her perfectly controlled routine. Upon arriving at the terminal, he retrieved the suitcase, handed her the envelope with the one-way ticket, and stated that this was an opportunity for her to start over away from him. She mentioned the baby, tried to hand him the test, asked him to listen, but Min-seok refused even to look, implying that it was all just a desperate attempt to trap him. When the car drove away, Soo-jin stood there in the rain, feeling like the world was collapsing. But when she touched her belly and promised to protect that life, something inside her began to rebuild itself. Because even on the airport floor, she discovered that she was capable of getting up, and that she would come back stronger than he could have imagined. The hospital room remained silent, broken only by the steady rhythm of the heart monitor tracking Soo-jin's heart, still fragile after the fainting spell caused by emotional and physical exhaustion. The soft morning light filtered through the curtains, illuminating her face with a delicacy that contrasted sharply with the chaos still consuming her from within. As if the world were offering her a fresh start, she didn't know if she deserved. Lying there, her hand on her stomach, she felt the weight of an uncertain future, carrying a life she had decided to protect, even without knowing how she would do it, without support, without money, and without the man who had promised love but delivered abandonment and contempt. The door opened discreetly, and a doctor entered the room with calm, confident steps, conveying tranquility even before speaking. Tall, elegant, and with a serene posture, he carefully reviewed the patient's chart, but his eyes revealed empathy. The name tag on his lab coat identified him as Dr. Park Jae-won, director of a support program for mothers in vulnerable situations. When he perceived the fear hidden behind Soo-jin's silence, he pulled up a chair and sat beside her, making it clear that he was there. Not only as a doctor, but as someone willing to listen. She spoke about being abandoned in the parking lot, the loneliness, the unexpected pregnancy, and the lack of prospects. Jae-won listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he articulated a phrase that pierced her defenses like a truth she needed to hear, explaining that some people confuse power with freedom, when often power only serves to hide cowardice. On the day of her discharge, he introduced Soo-jin to a support program that offered career guidance and temporary housing, stating that accepting help did not diminish her strength, but rather accelerated the moment when she would become independent. Months later, inspired by her own pain, Soo-jin studied, worked, and transformed her fragility into determination. While Min-seok remained trapped in his own arrogance, she grew stronger with each step, accumulating something more valuable than power: autonomy. Because rebirth doesn't happen when we are saved, but when we discover that we can save ourselves. A light rain fell on the skyscrapers of Seoul when Lee Min-seok arrived at MSK Holdings headquarters that morning. He had spent the night awake, revisiting memories that kept resurfacing since the Sky Global event. Soo-jin's name echoed in his mind like an unsettling reminder of something he had tried to bury, but which now loomed before him stronger than ever. When he entered the meeting room, he found the directors in a flurry of activity, all discussing the unexpected acquisition that had taken place in the early hours of the morning. Contracts signed, shares transferred, decisions sealed. MSK Holdings was no longer the same. And ironically, he still didn't know who had bought everything. The sound of the door opening broke the murmur. Elegant shoes crossed the marble floor with a confident rhythm. When the female figure entered, time seemed to stop. Han Soo-jin, impeccable, serene, and unattainable, crossed the room as if returning not to ask, but to declare possession. Min-seok's gaze fixed on her, unable to disguise his astonishment. It was the same woman he had left at the airport, but now she carried a presence that made him feel small, a weight he never imagined he could bear. Each of her steps sounded like the echo of fate's vengeance. "Good morning, gentlemen." His voice was firm, balanced, but carried a force that dominated the room. From today onwards, Sky Global Investments assumes full control of MSK Holdings operations. The directors exchanged disconcerted glances. Min-seok stood up abruptly, unable to contain the tension. "That's absurd," he exclaimed, trying to maintain his composure. "No one takes over a company of this size overnight." Soo-jin stared at him with the calmness of someone who no longer needed to explain herself. "No one, except those who know every hidden weakness behind the contracts you yourself signed." She approached the table, placing an envelope before him. The white paper contrasted with the metallic sheen of the Sky Global logo. Min-seok hesitated but opened it. Inside, he found the official transaction documents, and along with them, something that wasn't corporate paper. It was a perfectly restored copy of an old ultrasound dated 4 years ago, the same one he had crumpled and thrown away. His breath caught in his throat, and the world seemed to spin. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Soo-jin replied calmly, but without pity. "I never needed to. Look for it. It was always with me. What you threw away wasn't just a piece of paper, Min-seok. It was the beginning of your downfall." The executives, perplexed, silently looked away. The shame of the man who had once commanded respect now filled the room with a palpable unease. Soo-jin continued without raising his voice, but each of his words seemed like a calculated blow. "I built what you destroyed, and I didn't do it out of revenge, but out of justice. You took everything from me. I gave back only the truth." Min-seok tried to speak, but his voice betrayed him. The control he had always exerted over everything slipped through his fingers. He looked at her as if pleading for an explanation to lessen the punishment. But she only approached, placing her hand on the papers. "The difference between us is simple. When I lost, I learned to start over. When you lost, you learned what it means to be alone." The silence that followed was absolute. Soo-jin gathered the documents, turned to leave, and paused before the door, casting one last glance at the man she once believed to be invincible. "Years ago, you told me to disappear. I disappeared. But while you were forgetting me, I learned to fly." The door closed behind her with the solemnity of a final period. Inside the room, only the sound of Min-seok's breathing remained, ragged and weak, as if even the air had decided to abandon him. Outside, Soo-jin walked towards the dawn, feeling that the weight of her pain had finally transformed into power. What remained now was not revenge, but freedom, and that she would not share with anyone. 4 years had passed since the day Soo-jin collapsed unconscious at the airport. 4 years since Min-seok's last cold look, since the suitcase abandoned on the wet sidewalk and the sound of the car driving away as she struggled to stand. 4 years that felt like a lifetime. The woman who now walked through the corridors of the Seoul International Business Center no longer had the short, hesitant steps of before. There was firmness in her spine, precision in the rhythm of her heels, conviction in every gesture. Her hair, once tied in a makeshift ponytail, now fell neatly over her shoulders, and the off-white suit she wore seemed not only to dress her, but to proclaim her. No one needed to know her name to realize she was someone important. Just seeing her enter was enough. That day's event brought together the largest conglomerates in South Korea and international investors. It was the kind of environment where only heirs, CEOs, and diplomats circulated. The kind of environment where Min-seok had reigned unchallenged for years. Sky Global Investments, a foreign company that had been acquiring minority stakes in various strategic sectors, had announced the arrival of its new CEO to lead its Asian expansion. Rumors circulated. They said the new executive was brilliant, cold, enigmatic, and above all, ruthless in the market. The screen lit up, revealing growth charts and merger projections. The master of ceremonies smiled and announced, "It is an honor to introduce the new CEO of Sky Global Investments, responsible for the largest international acquisition of the decade. Welcome, Han Soo-jin." The silence that filled the auditorium was almost physical. Many searched the program for her name, trying to remember if they had heard of her before. Others whispered, wondering how a young unknown could have risen to such a high position in such a short time. But no one was as astonished as Lee Min-seok, who was watching the performance from the front row. He didn't recognize her immediately. The name sounded distant, almost like an unsettling memory from a dream. Only when she began walking toward the stage, her steps reflecting confidence and mastery, did his mind make the connection. His eyes widened, and for a second the world stopped. Soo-jin, the woman he had discarded like a crumpled piece of paper. She was there, not as a shadow, nor as a memory, but as power. Soo-jin stepped onto the stage with impeccable posture and upon reaching the podium, calmly gazed at the audience of executives. Her eyes met Min-seok's for just a second enough to shatter the control he had over his own life. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice firm and serene. "Today, we will begin a new phase in the Korean economy." Min-seok leaned back in his chair, trying to hide his shock. He watched her every move with a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. She spoke confidently, answered complex questions from foreign investors without hesitation, and delivered the presentation with the fluidity of someone born to be on that stage. With each word, her old image, the submissive, insecure, and humble woman, crumbled before him. Now, the person standing there was a strategist. While he was trying to process what he was seeing, Soo-jin concluded the presentation with a phrase that seemed aimed at only one spectator. "Never underestimate someone who has learned to stand up on their own 2 feet." The audience gave a standing ovation. Flashes went off. Journalists approached. She left the stage without losing control of her breathing. Min-seok stood up abruptly, as if his feet moved before his brain processed the decision. When he tried to reach her in the corridor reserved for executives, a line of security guards blocked his path. He finally understood that he no longer had access to her. But what he didn't yet know was that this public appearance was only the first step in the final blow. Because Soo-jin didn't come back to be seen. She came back to reclaim everything he tried to take from her, and this time, he would be the one begging for a second chance. The sky was beginning to lighten over Seoul as Soo-jin left the corporate building for the last time after the merger was finalized. Not as someone who needed to prove something, but as someone who finally understood her own worth. The cool morning breeze touched her skin, bringing a feeling of freedom so intense she could almost hear it as a whisper of victory. As she walked towards the Mapo Bridge, where the city slowly awakened, she felt the symbolic weight of each step, as if she were leaving behind not only a man who had destroyed her, but the version of herself she once believed needed to be accepted to deserve love. In her hands, she carried a sealed envelope containing the final document of the business transaction. She squeezed it gently, not out of necessity, but symbolism. That paperwork represented more than the fall of an empire. It represented the end of an emotional cycle. Upon reaching the middle of the bridge, she stopped and observed the movement of boats on the Han River, letting the cold wind dispel any lingering doubt. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, and checking the screen, she saw Min-seok's name. For a few seconds, she remained there, motionless, listening only to the distant sound of traffic. Before, that name had the power to unsettle her, to make her tremble and doubt herself. Now it was just a name, a notification among many others. She pressed the side button on the device, silencing the call without hesitation. It wasn't revenge, it was closure. The cycle was complete. With her phone still in her hands, she sat on the wooden bench near the railing, watching the river's current flow without asking permission, exactly as she planned to live from then on. She thought of her daughter, Han, who awaited her at home with easy laughter and an extraordinary ability to see the world with hope. She thought of Jae-won, who had been a pillar of support without ever trying to dictate her choices. She thought of each night she cried alone, believing her life was over, and gathering all these memories, she realized that growing up isn't about forgetting the pain, but about learning to walk, even with scars. Soo-jin stood up, opened the envelope she was carrying, and took out a single piece of paper, the official confirmation that from that day forward, she was the majority owner of the business group that Min-seok had inherited. She carefully folded the document and put it in her bag, as one keeps only what is necessary and gets rid of the rest. Finally, she took a deep breath and let out a phrase in a low voice, not as a provocation but as a liberation. I didn't win so you would see me. I won so I would never get lost again. Then she walked to the end of the bridge, each step dissolving the past into the dust of what no longer mattered. She was no longer the woman abandoned at the airport. She was the woman who returned and won. If this story touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel now and write in the comments, "I want the next story." The next video might be exactly the story you need to hear today.